Hello, everybody. It's been a while since we did our last chat. I think a number of us have had various life aspects intervene. I know I have. But here we are, and we have a group of questions from a blog um, that are kind of conversation starters for writers. So I'm going to start with one that I think is a optimistic question. What is your big crazy writing dream?
I'll go first.
Right.
Anybody? I'll go with,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, go
go,
ahead.
Bertel.
Okay. My dream is to write some sort of complex and layered science fiction story, something on the order of Dune, I guess, that has all these different facets to it, and that people will debate, wow, what did he mean by this, and was he foretelling that, and all sorts of things about, and while also still just liking it as a story. Just it can work on the level of just a nice fictional story, or you can say, wow, was he making some deep comment? And I'll never say if I am or not, so people would just have to wonder about it. So that's my dream.
You're not going to
Right
reveal
now,
some.
my dream is just to finish the thing I started, and it's moving very slowly. And it's actually, I think it is intended to be deep and layered and all that. So, yeah.
Your idea, Bertold, gave me a different idea than what I was going to say. So I'm going to give two things. If you ever read Wallace Stegner or Steinbeck, these James Michener, these epic stories that span generations in the West. I want to be able to write a story like that. Probably not even close to what they do because like Michener's books are 18,000 pages long and I remember the first one I ever read started with the geological formation of the part of Colorado or wherever that the story took place. But I started co-writing something with someone that has the potential to do that, and she dropped out. And as I struggle with what I'm going to write next, I've started to read what we had so far, and I think I'm going to give that a try and see what happens. But my other one that I was thinking about was whenever I'm in a movie theater, at some point while I'm watching a movie, I think it would be so cool to see one of my stories up on the big screen. That's kind of like my completely outrageous, never going to happen kind of dream that I have as a writer.
Right. Actually, I have the exact same one. Although, to be very honest, with the say the Devil and the Wolf, I think a mini series would be perfect. But I think about that a lot. But that to me is almost not like an author dream. That's a person dream. The people. You know, I- so I think more modest. Um, Probably almost like Audrey. There's the book I had to put aside only because of all stuff going on. But and I'm picking up again. I want to be able to craft a difficult book, and this is one because I'm combining history and mystery and humor, and that's tough. And I think if I can do it and finish it, well, finish is like Audrey, just finish it. But really, no, do it, finish it, and read it, or even maybe like a year from now, if I do get it out, reread it and go, wow, I think, at least from my point of view, that's pretty good. I did it. That accomplishment as an author to do something difficult. That's a little bit like almost Berthold's. You want to write something that isn't just notoriety, but captures something. And his was like sort of the dream, like, hitting on something serendipitously, or because you got an eye on the future, hitting on something that people can recognize later and go, wow, he thought of that. But it's more than because you'll probably be gone by then, Bertolt.
Yeah.
That's what happens to
Exactly.
authors. They look back and go, wow, that guy was a visionary. Uh, but yeah, that would be my dual dream. There's definitely the personal dream. There's no doubt. Somebody comes across my book and instead of saying, let's do yet another Harry Potter series for that monster, I think that they can instead say, here's something that's very different and unique, and I think would hit audiences because it's general enough and funny.
You hit Bertold's funny bone apparently.
Yeah, I know. Well, I
All I see, I this is a digression that I'll probably edit this out, but when I go on a certain other social media site, all I see is people talking about the latest reboot of Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or whatever and arguing about it. And it's just, well, actually, just yesterday, Mark involved me in something about Star Wars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
People rehashing that again.
Yes, someone bashed Phantom Menace, and I tagged Bertold in it.
This I know takes us out of author into movies and stuff, but just I have, like many people, pet peeves on all these remakes because I don't mind remakes of per se. In fact, sometimes they're phenomenal when people look at some stuff and then retwist it. But back in the day, a remake was usually done of something that either was very popular like decades and decades before, or was an unknown thing that they redid, or even a campy thing that they redid in a better way. Now these remakes are, they seem to be sandwiched together, right, almost right next to each other, and that's where you feel like it's just retreading and retreading, and
Yep.
it's kind of sickening. If there weren't much out there, like if we move to the probably negative future of AI is writing everything or creating all the movie stuff, and it's all very common and boring, then I could see like, well, what are you going to do? There's nothing out there. But there is so much out there, so much out there. Anything the four of us has written should be out there. And then when I look at all the other indie authors, and you go to like we had Saffron Asteria on, all the authors she interviewed, there's just no end of the creative stuff out
Yep.
there to mine. So, but
Which makes you wonder about AI and why it's even being used.
right, well, we got to come up with new things that they were already written. All right, some of them have been written and been out there for decades and still very, very good. So, but what can you do? I think the problem is it takes effort to actually go find something. Um, you know. Anyway,
Yeah. So
off
what's
that high horse.
what's the next thing on the list?
Okay, since we're talking about movies, can a movie ever be better than or as good as the book?
Yes, it can, but very rarely.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and use the example of The English Patient. Has anybody here either read the book or seen the movie?
I read the book,
Like
didn't see the movie.
I feel like I saw the movie. Can't say for sure, but I'm sure I didn't read the book.
I found the book kind of incoherent, but I thought the movie was pretty good.
My example of this is always Shawshank Redemption,
Ah,
which is based on a longer short story from Stephen King that I thought was just kind of meh. And Shawshank Redemption is just like one of those classic movies. And there's actually a couple of other movies that have been based on Stephen King books or stories that I've preferred as good as The Shining the book was and how it terrified me as a 15-year-old. I think the original The Shining with Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall is just classic. And I know that Stephen King, for whatever reason, hated it, but I just think that movie is incredible too. Shawshank,
That probably made you like it more. No.
yeah, maybe. Although I don't think I knew that when I no, I know when I first read it, and I was still a when I first saw it, and I was still a Stephen King fan back then. So, but I just think those two movies are incredible. The one that I don't think does it for me that a lot of people love is Dune. I don't get why people like the new version of
Right.
Dune on the screen.
Audrey, you go because I think I got a lot to say. I want to
I'm
try to
kind of
compress it.
disconnected from movies, so I'll just step aside from this question because I don't see a lot of movies and they're kind of something somebody else does. So, just count me out.
Okay. I actually I left this I left this question on the list when I was going through it for a good reason. There's many parts of this, but the three things I want to hit is first, I think as humans, for some reason, I think we get imprinted on the first time we see some new material as to that becomes our favorite. So often you read something and then you see a movie version and you're maybe dissatisfied. But I've seen it happen the other way around, where you see a movie and then you read the book and you go, I kind of like the movie. But same token, this next thing is, I think movies in general have a harder battle to win when there is a book existing, especially when it's a good book, because Dune is a good example. You mentioned that, and it's a perfect example because in Dune, when you're reading that book, the first book, there is so much that is inside the heads, all about strategy. And it's a slow crafted, there's so much going on, but it's not stuff you can bring to the screen. It never can be unless you're going to have a headsets on to hear people's thoughts as you're watching. I don't know, but it just can't. They can't win no matter what they do on that one. And I've always said that's just some books don't lend themselves to be movies. And then there are, I know in my mind I had a list, but I couldn't, getting older, I couldn't remember. But because I had this discussion before, but there are movies that I think are better than the source material. Shawshank Redemption was one of them. And then there are some that are like, I think neck and neck, but I think the movies come out better because, and this is also Shawshank Redemption, the performances are just stellar. And that rises above both the book material and the movie. I think sometimes the movies like Planet of the Apes, that's like this neck and neck. The book is pretty good and it even has a completely different twist, but the movie is so iconic. And I did see the movie first, so again, it might be an imprinting thing, but the simple answer is yes. The complex answer is honestly depends on the material, depends on how it's presented, and depends a little bit on what you encountered first.
Yeah, I think it does. Actually, I did actually remember one back from the days when I used to go to movies was A Passage to India. I don't know if anyone's seen that one
I
by
saw
the
that.
book by Forster. And I read the book after I saw the movie because I liked the movie, and the book was kind of a dud, I thought.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's another one. I knew there was some. The movie was definitely to me better than the book. The book dragged a bit. It reminded me of his other book, Room with a View, but maybe the writing is always a bit too subtle there. I don't know, but the movie had a lot of the visuals.
Mhm.
I think, I'd never read Lawrence of Arabia, the story of but I know that's a movie where the visuals just wipe almost everything away. And of course, there's incredible acting in both movies, but visuals are so impressive in them. I don't think that can come across really as well. Good point.
Did you answer, Bertold?
Yeah, I said the English
Oh,
patient. Yeah.
oh, that's
English
right.
case, right?
Okay, so how do you feel about the Lord of the Rings movies trilogy, Peter Jackson's versus the books?
I
Purposely didn't see them because I like the book so much.
I love the book, and when the movie came out, honestly, I was so impressed because I was expecting so little. I didn't think it could really be brought to the screen. I think, Peter Jackson has a lot of credit, I guess, but he does have a tendency to make everything long. But
Yes.
New Zealand deserves an incredible
Yeah.
credit because again, the visuals. And although there are a lot of people had a lot of issues with it, and I agree with the issues and things he cut out when he had this overblown movie anyway, why did he cut all that? But I thought, for the first bringing of something that big and that complex and that immersed in fantasy to the big screen, I don't think it could have been done better for first go at it. That was
Yeah.
so impressive. I've watched. In fact recently watched it again. The three, not in one sitting. That's just
The
inhuman.
director's cuts, all
Yeah.
three in one
Well,
sitting.
actually,
Come
that's
on.
the thing that kills me. I actually like the director's cuts better. And
Yeah.
again, because there was stuff cut out.
Yeah.
I think editing could have been better. Um, but anyway, yeah, I
I,
think
I think like you, I didn't expect much because
right.
it's how do you turn the Lord of the Rings? The one the one thing that I struggled with is and all the times I read the Lord of the Rings books over the years, and then the movies were just so much darker than I felt like I was reading when I read the books. There was this kind of I don't know, kind of sound weird, but kind of this lightness and non-seriousness to some extent about how he wrote them. And then the book is just dark, and I mean the movies are just dark and gloomy and super serious.
Right. I think that's definitely 100% true of The Hobbit, because The Hobbit almost like reading a
Yeah,
children's book, right?
yeah,
Well,
And
it
that
was
was
a
just,
children's book,
it was,
actually.
right. It was
Yeah.
a children's book. So, and, I think there is a
I'll
vast,
tell you one thing though about Lord of the Rings. I didn't see the movies, but I did listen to the music for it. I think
hmm
I even have it on CD somewhere. And the one thing that really impressed me was a song that was supposed to represent Gollum. I don't know if you remember that. It was sort of about just basically how hard it was to be Gollum.
yeah,
And I thought that really fleshed out that character who was really more complex than some people might think.
yeah.
yeah,
Well, you'll be interested in knowing that one of the things on this on the roster is coming to the little screen is something like the life of Gollum. I don't know,
yeah.
Yeah.
or
They're
searching for
mining it
Gollum or
for all
whatever.
it's worth.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've had this conversation on Twitter. I have absolutely no interest in anything there.
right,
Stephen Colbert is going to write a what
right.
it's something about
It's
Lord.
a,
It's like
right. I
the
think
sequel to
it's
Lord
either
of the
going to
Rings.
be the stuff that they cut out, like Tom Bombadil, just the beginning part, and see how that goes, or it's the whole. I don't know. I don't know. But again, it's like too. Maybe because I'm getting older, and what I think is recently happened was a lot longer than I think. But I
Yeah,
think it's too
yeah,
still too soon. And again, when you think of especially the Lord of the Rings, how many people, authors, especially I think even indie authors more so, read those books over and over and crafted their own worlds. And some of those authors have had their stuff go on to be made into series, et cetera. And good for them. But it's just such an enormous amount out there. And
yeah.
if that first try by Peter Jackson was really good enough to win Oscars and things like
Right.
that,
Why keep going on?
yeah, why, it's again, it's just a cash cow. I understand that
Mhm.
it's an
Yeah,
industry, but um, maybe you could do a little cash cow and a little more mining for gold.
yeah.
I think
Well,
that's why all the remakes too,
right.
right? It's that whole,
It's funny. Yeah,
if it
Yeah,
worked 10 years ago or
right.
five, or even 2 years
yeah.
ago, let's pump some more out of it.
But it's like The Shining. They remade The Shining once, maybe twice since the original, and every time I hear about it, it's like, why? Why would you redo that? Nothing is going to be as good as the original Shining movie.
Right.
It just can't be. But money.
Yep.
Okay, how do you choose your characters' names?
Oh man, this is so funny. Some of them, they just pop up and they're just the right name, and that's the easy part. But like I'm writing this thing and I write longhand. So I'm writing away and I need a name for somebody, some minor character. So a name pops up and they're usually kind of stupid names. And then, a couple scenes later, I need that name again, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. And so I have to flip back through all my scribbles. Oh, yeah, that person's that. And I'm sure some of them I'm mixing up. And I've even resorted to feeble things like X, Y, Z. And then I sort of flesh them out. So the X character becomes Xena, like Xena, and the Z character is Zeta. And so I'll probably have all these names of people with Greek letters and, the names of the Greek letters. And I keep telling myself, when you go back to, like type this up and make it into a real Word document manuscript, then you'll have to go and standardize all these names. But right now it's a big mess. But that's just the way I write. So that's the downside of handwritten manuscripts.
I've got four. I'm probably
Yeah,
miscounting. I feel like Spanish Inquisition, there were three, no, four. But one is just what pops in my head. Okay. That's happens sometimes. I just get, especially short stories. Name comes in my head and I'm good with it. Second is I do want a good name, and I keep circling around the names. And then what I did, I go online and I go look at baby name generators.
Mm.
Especially you could do by letter. I want something begin with an M because already. And then third is like there was one character in The Devil and the Wolf that an early reviewer said these two names are a little too similar and I get them mixed up. And I said, all right. And then the next day I was at the bank asking something about my account. And I looked at the name tag of the person I was talking to and I said, oh, good name. I use that. And then the last thing is, yes, there are times I go to craft something specifically, like in Devil and the Wolf, Mephistopheles' fake last name was Charis. That's Greek for shadow, or yeah, I think it's Greek for shadow. So I was just playing off names like that. And I do that sometimes. I think of a word and then go look up in different languages what that is and then put that right in.
But
So
yeah, the internet is great for if you need help. Like when I wrote those two stories set in Egypt, I wanted some genuine like names that actual people living in Egypt at the time would have. So I looked up stuff on Google
Mhm.
for, lists of Egyptian forenames and stuff. And that was very helpful. And surnames for that matter. So yeah. And the baby name thing, I'm sure I've tried that too for something. So it's good to have. And I mean, there's even fantasy character name generators you can use.
right, you can use
So
those too.
yeah,
A friend of mine who also does some writing occasionally had told me once that what they like to do sometimes when it's stuck on a name is think of all their favorite authors, musicians, etc., and then use the first and last names of those, like they just mix them up. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I even had a guy contact me this a long time ago when I wrote the Herbert West stories. And, the narrator for some of them was this fellow called Charles Milburn. And I don't know why Charles, that just kind of popped into my head. But I think I picked Milburn from a book by Peter Straub, which was set in a town called Milburn that probably doesn't
There you
exist.
go.
So that's how I got that. But somebody emailed me years later, and whose name was that? Charles Milburn. And he said, why did you use that name? And did I do it because of him? And I said, no. And I told him how I got the name. And I said, no, it has nothing to do with you, just a coincidence. Good thing he didn't sue.
Oh, well, yeah, you always have that, all names and characters are fictional,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
in your
Bertold?
I actually, my process for naming is very similar to the four methods that Richard outlined. I guess the only thing I would add is sometimes, okay, this is sort of complicated, but there's a meme in the video game world because there are lots of video games that have unnamed protagonists where you're a nameless person doing stuff, and so it's become like a joke that the name of the character is John plus whatever the name of the game is. Like if the game is Doom, they say, "Oh, his name is John Doom" or something. I for some reason am amused by that. So that's, for example, where my story John Nuclear, I was like, what's just a silly, crazy, completely over the top name? I was like, that's it. That's the only thing I would add. Otherwise, what Richard said is basically my way.
Yeah. I think
which
everybody's touched on my different ways of doing it. If I'm writing a story that's set in a different country, then I Google, Syrian surnames and popular boys' names in Syria or something like that. One of the things I do sometimes is if I'm struggling to come up with a name for a character, I'll just look at the books that are in the room I'm at and look at the names of the authors. And some variation of some name on a author's name on a book will become a character. There's something one of you said also that I was going to comment. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, didn't you say you have a friend like who does research on
Oh,
code names and
yeah,
things like that?
yeah, that's yeah. So yeah, and that showed up in the jump. It gave part of the absurdist nature of the jump that I was able to insert into it comes from a friend of mine who reads a lot of books written in the 1800s or about people in the 1800s because he's a huge Lincoln history buff and just other things, and so he keeps sending me these weird names, and a bunch of those weird names became the characters surrounding the president that are, all the names are disclosed kind of towards the end. So yeah, that is
Hmm.
You you
another thing.
Yeah, you just point out something also that I do. I had to do it with Perseus. I go look at the region and also same thing. Like for that, I had to look at what common Celtic names were. Again, I'm just
Yeah,
using internet. And the nice thing is the internet wasn't exact or the person's even making stuff. It doesn't matter. I'm only looking for a name. But
yeah,
yeah, but you brought that up. Regional naming.
yep. The other thing, not name oriented, but there's a series of short stories I've written that I at some point want to turn into something bigger about people who work in carnivals. And I found a website that has carnival lingo on it. So, just dozens and dozens of words that, carnies say this and that, what it means. So I can use that to authentic, what's the right word I'm looking for? Make the dialogue more authentic
Authentic.
in
Hmm.
the, yeah. So
All
you
right.
can find everything on the internet these days.
Yeah, we'd be in tough shape without the internet. I remember doing a lot more actual library research for my
Yeah.
first book because
Yeah.
the internet wasn't like, and I used to look things up at work, but I also used to like read books about all kinds of things and make notes. I still have like stacks of notes. So yeah, things are a lot easier now. Too
Yeah.
easy, maybe.
Yep.
It definitely, yeah, I have to say, doing research, like I said, I go online and I do look a lot of stuff up there, and it really is so much easier. But back in the day, for those who will never experience this, when you had to go research in a library, and I was very lucky being brought up in New York, the libraries were just beautiful unto themselves. But spending all those hours in the library, especially on a rotten day outside, it just there's something wonderful about it. And you're surrounded by all those books, and you're digging, for what you need. Yeah, I do kind of miss that, but yeah, it was an experience.
Okay. What's the best part about being a writer?
All the money.
Yes. Raining down on us. Okay, what's the hardest part about being an author? There is no money.
Right. Oh,
To me, the best part is when I have an idea and it's like there's no one best part. It's when I have an idea and I start writing it and I think it's going to be a good story, and then I go through the massive imposter syndrome and writer's block, and 3 years later I suddenly have an aha moment and I figure out how to finish it and I finish it. You
now,
know,
for me, the aha moment is the best part, where
yeah,
you're putting this thing together, and suddenly this key piece shows up from who knows where, and you put it in, and you have a coherent story arc, and you get it into words, like actually getting into words. That's a big struggle. But once
yeah,
it's done, and you read it over, and whether it's marketable or truly good or whatever, but that's the time when you think, "Yep, I have done it," and that's really good. And that's before all the marketing and formatting and picking keywords and all that stuff.
yep.
Bertolt,
So my real answer is similar to Audrey's. It's that aha moment, but it's also just, there's so many projects you work on that don't go anywhere, that you try something and it just sort of peters out, and you put all these things together and then you start writing something and it just works. That's sort of how, like, I feel about Vespasian Moon. Was just It just all came together like I wanted, and I was like, this is fun. That's a really
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
satisfying because of all the times it doesn't happen. So when it does, it feels great.
for me, a couple of things I love about writing. Number one, for me at least, it's low pressure because it's not my job. And I've always my entire life I've always been able to do it when I felt I wanted to, and that's how sometimes art needs to be. Um, Second, I think I've mentioned this before, whenever anyone, because I love to entertain, whenever anyone says, I read your book and yeah, I really enjoyed it or it made me laugh, that's the big thing. I love that. And then also, I know there's that, and this is ironic, but I know a lot of people have this, it's ironic because I am a procrastinator who never finishes things, but a sense of completion. When even if it's not you still have to edit it and everything like that, or even after that, like when you get the book in your hand, I always say that's that magical moment when your thoughts are now something physical that you hold in your
Mhm.
hand. I love that. And then also that moment, maybe it's usually at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning when you've been working on something for a while and you're typing and suddenly your brain just starts like flowing and your fingers are going and it may be crap in the morning, but right now that rush, that
Mhm.
mental rush, that creative mental rush, that is probably my favorite thing that I hope happens. You can't plan that, can't create it. That's it.
I disappeared for a moment because I thought I was going to sneeze. That might still happen. Okay, what's the hardest part about being an author?
Sense of completion.
I'll just say it's the combination of the internal editor and the imposter syndrome and what that all does to my ability to even sit down and write.
Yeah, I guess so. The worst part of being an author is the that marketing side. Where you feel like you're a failure if your books really don't take. Although, I mean, I've got what 8 or 9 books now, and they're all kind of way down there in the rankings, and that's just normal. And so maybe I'm not worrying about that so much. But it's kind of like that feeling of, I've created this thing, it's really great. So why doesn't anyone care? Yeah, that's pretty well the worst thing. And it must be because I'm not selling it properly. So I guess that's the imposter syndrome. I don't know, but it's that aspect
No,
of it.
it's not imposter syndrome. It's you became a writer to write,
Yeah, not to sell
not to
stuff.
market books.
Right, right.
And
That's art.
it's a completely different skill set and a different it's like a whole different job.
Hmm.
Write the book, marketing is completely different. And it's just a question of how much time and effort do any of us want to put into that.
For me, it's a couple of things, but definitely the editing part, the proofreading and editing, that's true of everything I do. Once I get the creative stuff out, and once it's done, like it's all out of my brain and it's on paper, uh, too much of me feels like I'm done. And then having to go back and craft it and hone it and everything, it's a bit tedious for that part of my brain because there's not a lot of creativity going on. I've always had that problem with, of course, a couple of things. It's getting the creative part done is great, and then all right, now you got to you know clean it up, and that's very tedious for me. As for imposter syndrome, by the way, I may have mentioned this before, but part of my brain leans into that and loves it. Like if I can get away with faking, that's kind of fun. I don't know where that comes from, but he's gonna sneeze now.
Hmm.
Uh,
I actually like that polishing up part.
I
Like
know,
because
I
it's
know. We've talked
because
about
it's
this.
all
You love
there
it.
there. It's like
Yeah,
exists. So all I
yeah.
have to do is kind of work on it. Whereas creating the thing in the first place, I find is hard because what if I have a lapse of enthusiasm and then this partially scribbled thing just lays there and
Um,
then it's kind of on my mind in a bad way. So yeah.
I need to have you do my next proofreading, Audrey. It's just
Yeah,
because
actually I sort of
it's not
enjoy
like
that.
I don't want to do, but I want to make you happy. I'm doing it for you. Anyway, Bertold.
I guess the hardest part is what I mentioned before about all the projects you start and you think this is going to go somewhere and then it really doesn't. At least for me, it's like
Yeah.
I had so many ideas and I thought this is the one and then it's not. But but it makes up for it when it actually is. So I guess it all works out.
Yeah. Oh, I always look at it, it's like, in the garden, you plant stuff and some of it's going to grow and flourish and some isn't, but the whole process of gardening is really, and the ones that do come out, the ones that do grow, you know,
Yes, I can
the
relate
great
to that.
tomatoes and stuff like that. You're going, okay, so that other one didn't grow, but well, what are you gonna do? Um,
Okay. Last question. Given all of what we just talked about, why did you, and I hate the way this question is worded, by the way, why did you decide to become a writer? And I hate the
We didn't.
question.
Nobody
Nobody
decides.
I
decides exactly. It's
It
something that just kind of starts to happen.
just, you have to. You couldn't not do it, I think is going to be the answer.
when I saw that question, I kind of left it in on my list because I thought rather than why did you decide to be a writer, I read it as why did you decide to publish a book or publish or put your writing
Yeah.
out there? I switched it up because you're right. Yeah, Bertolt did so much tonight. There's no question about it. You had to because it's part of who you are in a way. It's your drive. It's how you want to express yourself. But why? Why maybe look at it that way? Why did you decide to put your writing out there? And again, my story was I did it on a lark for just, people I knew. I thought it was an easy way to do it. And then somebody I didn't know picked up the book, off Amazon. So it was kind of accidental because I had been writing before a lot, but just for, close people. So, but I know other people have goals in mind, real goals. And
Well,
go
for
ahead,
me, it
shame,
was more
shame
of
me.
something I decided I couldn't do. Like I even thought about it, because I see all this stuff about writers and you know, listen to interviews with them and all that. And I think, it'd be really nice to do that. But then I sort of thought, but I didn't get the right sort of education. Like I didn't go for the MFA and here I am in this other job, and so I guess it's just not going to happen. And then it sort of did like you guys have also said, suddenly you've got this thing and you want to write it, so you write it. And then I went through the trying to get published traditionally thing, which was a real bummer. And just about then, when I'd sort of given up on the whole thing, suddenly self-publishing that was sort of semi-respectable turned up. And here we are.
I
I
think, before you go,
Go
I just
ahead.
want to add one thing, because I don't know why you made me think of this, but I swear to gosh, I wish there was a way I could prove this, but I don't think I would have written at all if I didn't ever take a typing class,
Hmm.
because I don't know what it is, but I love typing because it's so quick. I'm a terrible handwriter and my hand cramps nothing, but I get ideas out faster. So, but anyway, go
Hmm.
ahead.
Well, like I said, I don't think anybody really decides to do something like this. It, but to the extent there was a process, it was I've read voraciously my entire life, and my dad was a writer. And while the only books that he published had to do with writing, his novels were never published. When he wrote, I don't know, 3 or 4 novels. He would have me read his manuscripts for him when I was in my 20s. And so that made the idea possible. You know, it's just like, oh, wait, someone can actually do this. Because I hated writing when I was in school, hated writing. But seeing what he did made it seem possible. And then, 15 years later, I finally had an idea for a novel that I could write, and I started writing it. And, regarding putting it out into the world, well, once I started writing and I had a novel and dozens of short stories, well, what am I going to do with this? Did I just do this just to have it sit on my computer?
Mhm.
You know? So I started self publishing because that's, yeah, the advent of self publishing made it possible. So, um, I saw a question, one of the non writing related questions that I was going to ask. Hold on. What book have you read over and over?
Well, that brings us back to the Lord of the Rings. And even some Stephen King. I have to admit, a few of his
Yeah,
books
yeah.
several times. Let's see, who else? This
When
author
I was a
called Mary Renault, she's long dead, who wrote books set in ancient Greece, like a whole bunch of them, dealing with the mythical sort of characters like Theseus, and also a whole trilogy about Alexander the Great. So I've read those multiple times. It's mostly older books. And right now I don't reread things as much just because there's so much other stuff to read.
yeah,
So,
yeah. The when I was a kid, there was a book that I got out of the library about Man o' War, who was the racehorse in like 1920 or 1921, and I probably checked that book out every year for years when I was a kid. Um, Lord of the Rings, Dune, Stephen King books. The one, and I like you, there's just so much to read. I generally don't reread things very often anymore. But the one that I can think of that's current is The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
mm,
Every once in a while, I just need to read that.
mm.
So,
I get, in a way, it must be sort of like getting a craving for some particular food,
yeah.
like the flavor of something, and you just
Oh,
want to relive that.
the other one that I, more current that I reread every once in a while is Everything Matters by Ron Curry.
Mm.
So, Richard Bertold.
Go ahead, Vodka.
Um, well, there are a couple I could name, but I'm going to throw out a couple of current indie authors. Zachary Schatzer, who is like Woodhouse in that you can't be unhappy while reading him. He's just so. So whenever I need to cheer up, I read him. And Adam Bertocci, his short stories, I've reread many of them several times, particularly the Halloween ones. You won't be surprised to learn. As far as more classic authors, Woodhouse, I've read Right Ho Jeeves probably like 5 times. And then, and H.P. Lovecraft, who, you
Yeah.
know, H.P. Lovecraft is fascinating to me because I don't even think he's a good writer. And yet, I think I've talked about this before. And yet, there is something about him that keeps me coming back. I don't.
Don't necessarily have to be a good writer to pull you in
Yeah.
some way.
He's not only not a good writer, he's not even a good person. And yet and yet I somehow keep rereading him. It's a little creepy in a way.
Hmm.
Well, let's see. For me, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish by Dr. Seuss. No,
Excellent choice.
well, you know
Excellent choice.
what? That's an inside joke because that was the first book I ever actually read. Like, somebody didn't read to me or whatever. I
I'd
actually
be
read.
more impressed by Fox and Socks.
But okay. But honestly, like Evan said, The Lord of the Rings, and I think it was when I first read it, I was just so taken away. I reread that book probably like 20, 30
Which
times.
one?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah,
Lord of the Rings 20, 30 times up until my mid 20s or so.
yeah.
It's something about it just kept like it draws you in, and I would find new stuff I didn't think, I didn't read before or whatever. But outside of that obsessive thing, P.G. Woodhouse, you mentioned, I've read multiple times. Richard Russo's books, I've reread his a number of times too. And let's see, something else that occurred to me. Oh, I mentioned this a few times. Claudius, not Claudius the God as many times, but I Claudius, the first book I've read that, reread it a few times. There must be a couple others I've reread a few times and really still enjoy. I think part of it is the Lord of the Rings stuff and all. Oh, yeah, I know. Gosh, I do this. This may triggered it in my mind because I was going to say the thing of it is almost like watching old reruns, Mary Tyler Moore, whatever. It kind of brings you back, makes you enjoy. Oh, oh, around. So, okay.
Richard is frozen.
Uh-oh.
Your yeah, your signals. I think all of ours are okay, but you were frozen. But you're okay now.
Okay. I was going to say something I do every maybe decade, and I've been around for several decades, is I will go through and reread all of Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot books.
Mm.
because you can get through them pretty quickly too. It's not like and there's 33 of them, I think, and so it's not, but it's not as big undertaking thing. But I do revisit those a lot. Again, for the same thing. I reread those when I was much younger, and it's always cool to go through and reacquaint yourself with all of that.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question, and then I need to go mow the lawn. um, okay, so we've all done the reading Lord of the Rings multiple times, and I'm assuming we would add The Hobbit to that list.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think I've read The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit in 20 years, probably when I gave them to my older son to read, and I might have read them again then. Do any of you still read them every once in a while, or do you think you
Mm.
would? Because me personally, I feel like the word choice is all wrong, but I feel like the movies ruined the books for me. Not
Well,
in the
that's why
sense
I
that it
don't watch
ruined
the movies.
it, not in the sense that the movies ruined the story for me or whatever, but I have these memories of the Lord of the Rings when I read them when I was a kid, a teenager in my 20s, like Richard, probably, who knows how many times I read Lord of the Rings between the ages of 14 and 30. That's one memory. The movie is another memory, but that's kind of now replaced in my head that memory that I had from when I was a teenager. And I don't think I can get that memory back. So I don't want to read the books again.
Hmm.
This happened to me with the Harry Potter
Yeah.
movies because again, I read the books, before the movies came out, and as a kid, and that's part of it. When you're a kid, you
Yeah.
have this imagination. I had a very definite picture of how everything looked, and then I saw the movies, and the movies, yeah, overwrote that. And honestly, my picture I think was better. Now, part of again, I was of course, I was a kid, and also the quality of Harry Potter books went worse as they went along. But nevertheless, I just so I worry about that with everything now. Any movie adaptation, I think it can just override what you pictured, and then it's a problem.
Well, I reread The Lord of the Rings, I know right after the movies because I had it for a long time, and then I have these leather-bound editions, and I was reorganizing stuff upstairs, and I was moving things, that I had packed away, and that was one of them, and I came across it. It's probably like 5, 6 years ago, and that was the last time I read it, just because I came across it. But like Audrey had mentioned, I think the problem is my to be read pile. Is huge. And I think the difference is when I was younger, I did have a lot more free time to read. I
Hmm.
know once I started, and I don't work anymore, but once I was working at this place and I had an hour and a half drive there, an hour and a half back, that's 3 hours a day. I mean, normally that 3 hours, a big portion of it would have been reading time. So, I really dropped off the number of books I would read every year dropped off significantly. Now I have technically the free time, but you'd be surprised. Uh,
Now
but
you've
yeah,
got to write stuff.
what was that?
Now you have to do writing.
Yeah,
Don't have time for reading.
right. I used to always do both. Uh, but yeah, now it's I think I don't know. I don't know. I have an explanation for it, but
I have one last comment related to movies and books that's kind of particularly directed to Mark. Um, there is a novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars, that is so much better than that movie.
Really?
Yes.
I have never read a book that novelizes a movie that's already been made because I just
I
think
have.
how what I
Mo-
interesting.
like 99% of them are trash tie-ins. This is why
Yeah.
this book is so
Uh,
fascinating because it's actually good. And you would be fair to say, you could say, well, they could hardly do anything but improve on that awful movie. But
so since you brought this up, I never remember which one is the one that has the absolute horrible acting that I ended up falling asleep. Was it Phantom Menace?
that's Revenge of the Sith, yes.
It is? Okay. The
Yeah.
one where Natalie Portman and what's his name are in that chamber having absolutely horrible dialogue.
Well, that actually happens in 2 movies, but
It might happen in 9 movies, just different characters.
I'm probably going to get this wrong, so my apologies out there to everyone who's going to fact find me. You say, all right, you're right, but this is what's in my mind. A movie I watched once that you all know of, and I did love it, but parts of it kind of, I don't know. But then when I read the book and I liked it even more. But then I thought, all right, so, the movie was made on the book, but it turned out they were both, as I could be wrong here, made about the same time. And then the movie actually I think came out just before the book was published, and that is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, I didn't know.
I don't know if, again, I'm
Yeah.
probably wrong because I'm thinking this from like decades back.
I believe Kubrick and Clark developed them sort of at the same time, working together. And yes, they were meant almost to sort of complement each other. That you can't.
They did, because the book had more of a narrative structure that explained. It wasn't just explaining what's going on, but it had a flow. Whereas the movie, so typical of Kubrick, was just all image and what, I don't know. I loved it, but I actually liked the book. But yeah, so there you go, Mark. That's a book you could have read that came out after the movie,
Yeah.
but also before the movie.
As the movie was showing up on the screen, the book came out.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, I'll just mention I got sucked in by 3 AI written books.
Ooh.
And I'm going to do a blog post about this
I look forward
probably
to
a
that.
week from tomorrow. But yeah, and to me, the formula that people who want to make money, and I don't think they will make money, but you get AI to generate a book, and you really don't care whether it's any good. But then you do up a really good description of the book, get a nice cover made, probably by AI, even set up an author website for an author that doesn't exist, and you will snare some people. Because I got sucked in by 3 of
I
these
look
books.
forward to your blog post.
Yeah.
By the way,
just
I
wait
know
for it.
there's no doubt how negative I am towards AI written stuff and AI graphic stuff, but your comment will not make money, I think, is the exact opposite. One of the things I do.
Oh, I don't know. These
this
particular
AI
books
stuff is,
are just terrible.
well, yeah, but it's going to be the same. And my apologies to people who love the fast food stuff, and not because it's all they can afford, but is like fast food chains. It's going to come out with everything recognizable and comfortable that people are used to. And it's going to be like, high calorie, low nutrition for your brain.
Well, they're going to have to polish up the AI text. That's all.
Yeah, well, that will happen. But now that they can't steal from people as much, or they will, but they'll have to do it more surreptitiously, more secretively,
Surreptitiously.
surreptitiously. Thank you. Brain.
Okay,
Anyway,
other than Bertolt,
yeah.
we're all at the age where word retrieval is a problem.
Yeah. I just make it up when I can't retrieve it. That's
right. Yeah, exactly.
Sort of like AI.
Okay. Okay.
Good to talk to you. Anybody out there who's still watching now, feel free to answer the questions and comments on our blog.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day. I'll
Okay.
talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.